Paris, France. May 30th, 1832. Two figures stood facing each other in a field at Gentilly, just south of Paris. One was Évariste Galois, a 20-year-old mathematical prodigy. The other, his opponent in what would become one of history's most consequential duels. Between them lay not just a personal grievance, but the potential loss of mathematical discoveries that would remain buried for 15 years. Ideas that would eventually revolutionize the field of algebra. This was no ordinary crime of passion. This was the snuffing out of a genius whose work would eventually transform mathematics, physics, and even modern computer security. And the true victim wasn't just Galois himself, but nearly gene ratios of scientific progress. The victim, Évariste Galois, was no stranger to controversy. Born October 25, 1811, in Bourg-Lorraine near Paris, he displayed exceptional mathematical talent from an early age. But witnesses described a young man who was equally defined by his revolutionary political fervor as by his mathematical brilliance. The victim had a troubled history, notes Professor Tony Rothman, a physicist and historian of science. Twice rejected from the prestigious École Polytechnique, expelled from the École Normale, imprisoned twice for Republican activities. His life was characterized by rejection from the established order. The mathematical establishment had been particularly brutal. When Galois submitted groundbreaking papers to the French Academy of Sciences, they were lost or rejected. When he published his work in private journals, it was ignored or misunderstood. The evidence points to a mind operating at a level that his contemporaries couldn't comprehend, a cognitive isolation that likely contributed to his increasingly radical political activities. His notebooks, preserved as evidence of his genius, reveal a man who had discovered something profound, a complete theory of when polynomial equations could be solved by radicals. What mathematicians had been struggling with for centuries, this young revolutionary had cracked before reaching legal drinking age. The crime scene. The night before the duel presents us with one of mathematics' most dramatic scenes. Investigators reconstructing the timeline note that instead of resting for the confrontation to come, Galois spent his final night writing. Not a confession, but a mathematical testament. Consider the evidence of his final hours, our investigation reveals. Marginal notes reading, "I have no time, and this is to be published," appear throughout his manuscripts. He was racing to preserve ideas he knew were at risk of dying with him. The letter to his friend Auguste Chevalier, written that night, serves as both suicide note and scientific will. "I have made some new discoveries in analysis," he wrote. "If I perish, I beg the patriots, my friends, not to reproach me for dying otherwise than for my country." By dawn on May 30th, exhausted from his night of writing, Galois arrived at the dueling ground. The physical evidence of what happened next remains frustratingly incomplete. We know a single pistol shot struck him in the abdomen. No physician was present, a common but potentially fatal omission in illegal duels of the period. The duel itself appears to have been conducted according to the irregular code of honor of the time, notes historian Laura Toti Rigatelli. But the absence of medical assistance represents either criminal negligence or deliberate endangerment. Abandoned at the scene, Galois was discovered by a passing peasant who transported him to the Cochin hospital. He died the following day, May 31st, likely from peritonitis resulting from his untreated wound. The suspects. The identity of Galois' killer remains a subject of historical dispute. Some evidence points to members of the artillery of the National Guard. But the motive remains equally mysterious. The prevailing theory involves a woman named Stéphanie Félicie Potarin du Motel, described in some accounts as an infamous coquette by Galois himself. Was this a crime of romantic rivalry? Political assassination disguised as a matter of honor? Or simply the tragic outcome of the dueling culture that claimed so many young lives in 19th century France? The circumstantial evidence suggests a setup, argues historian Tony Rothman. Galois was not known as a skilled marksman, and arrived exhausted from his night of writing. Whether intentional or not, the conditions heavily favored his opponent. No charges were ever filed. Dueling, while technically illegal, was rarely prosecuted in Restoration France. Galois killer walked free, unknown to history except as the man who extinguished one of mathematics' brightest lights. The cover-up. What followed Galois' death bears all the hallmarks of institutional neglect that nearly constitutes a second crime. Buried in a common grave at Montparnasse Cemetery, attended by only a handful of political associates, Galois and his revolutionary mathematical insights came perilously close to permanent obscurity. The mathematical establishment that had rejected him in life continued to ignore him in death, notes mathematical historian Peter Neumann. His funeral was attended by friends from revolutionary societies, but not a single professional mathematician was present. His papers, entrusted to his brother Alfred and friend Auguste Chevalier, narrowly escaped destruction. Chevalier published a short notice about Galois' work in September 1832, but it generated little interest. The mathematical community, the very people who should have recognized the significance of his work, turned a blind eye. For 15 years, these papers gathered dust. 15 years during which mathematics struggled with problems Galois had already solved. 15 years of scientific progress delayed. The cold case reopened. The case of Galois' mathematical legacy was finally reopened in 1843 when mathematician Joseph Liouville began studying the forgotten manuscripts. Even for Liouville, one of France's leading mathematicians, deciphering Galois' condensed notations required substantial investigation. Liouville's examination of the evidence revealed something extraordinary. Our investigation continues. This unknown young man had developed a complete theory linking group structures to the solvability of equations, a connection that would transform algebra from a computational art to a structural science. In 1846, Liouville published Galois' papers in his mathematical journal, declaring to the community that this cold case contained ideas of a profound correctness and an admirable elegance. The mathematical resurrection of Évariste Galois had begun. The legacy, case closed but never forgotten. Today, the case of Évariste Galois stands as one of history's most consequential killings of intellectual potential. His theories now form the backbone of abstract algebra. The structures he identified, Galois groups, Galois fields, are fundamental tools in modern mathematics, physics, and cryptography. When you use secure encryption online, you're benefiting from mathematical structures that Galois pioneered, explains cryptographer Bruce Schneier. His work on finite fields forms the basis for many encryption algorithms that protect digital communications. The true crime in this story extends beyond the killing of a young mathematician. It encompasses the systematic rejection that nearly buried revolutionary ideas, the 15-year delay in recognizing his genius, and the incalculable scientific progress lost through his premature death. Galois' final night of frantic writing, choosing to preserve his ideas rather than rest for the duel, represents both the tragedy of his death and the triumph of his intellectual survival. Though he died believing his greatest work might never be understood, his ideas eventually found justice. 2 centuries later, the case of Évariste Galois reminds us of the fragility of genius and the potential immortality of human thought. His murderer may have escaped justice, but Galois achieved something far more significant than vengeance: mathematical immortality. The bullet that struck him on that May morning in 1832 did end a brilliant life. But it failed in what might have been its greater crime: the erasure of ideas that would transform our understanding of the mathematical universe. Case file hashtag 1832-05. The killing of Évariste Galois remains technically unsolved. His mathematical legacy, however, is closed with a verdict of profound and lasting significance.